On the evening of 9th of August 2014, a white police officer named Darren Wilson shot and killed a young black man named Michael Brown. The shooting took place in the suburb of Ferguson in the midwestern state of Missouri after he confronted Brown and his friend Dorian Johnson for walking in the middle of the road. He shot the unarmed Michael Brown at least 6 times, including twice in the head. This was a big test for the media. Ferguson is a town which is 67% black, while its police force is 94% white. It is in a country in which the police kill, on average, 420 people a year in the course of an arrest. A country in which police kill black people at approximately 4 times the rate at which they kill white people. So would the media understand the death of Michael Brown in light of these facts and articulate the natural outrage felt by people in Ferguson? Or would it do what it usually does and pander to the police? Almost as soon as this killing took place, a series of stories appeared in the mass media suggesting that Brown had attacked Wilson, badly wounding him. ABC reported that Wilson had suffered a serious facial injury. Fox News reported that Brown had broken Wilson's eye socket. He was beaten very severely, the channel claimed. Even when the broken eye socket story was debunked, news outlets persisted in trying to find an angle. CNN's Don Lemon claimed that Wilson's head had been treated for swelling around the face and eyes, with other news media repeating the line that Wilson had a badly swollen face. Photographs of Wilson's supposedly beaten face show a tiny red scuff mark on his cheek, one on his neck, and a graze resembling a shaving cut on his chin. No swelling. In fact, it now seems the only reason he went to hospital was because he was advised to do so by his attorney. What about the victim? What about Michael Brown? Wilson's testimony said that Brown, while attacking him, looked like a demon. But the demonization of Brown began almost immediately after his death. Right-wing news sites slandered Brown's family or dug up pictures from Brown's Instagram account, which they claim show him flashing gang signs. The notion of black people showing gang signs is a particular US media obsession. The New York Times published a, by now infamous article remarking that Brown was no angel because he liked to rap and had dabbled in drugs and alcohol. When it was disclosed that Michael Brown was planning to enroll in college, Fox News, evidently worried that this might humanize the deceased, attempted to prove otherwise, to no avail. Within a week of the shooting, Ferguson Police Department claimed that Brown and his friend, Dorian Johnson, had been prime suspects in the robbery of a nearby convenience store, and that Wilson had identified Brown as the suspect. The truth, as Police Chief Thomas Jackson later admitted, is that Wilson did not know that Brown was a suspect and stopped him for a minor traffic violation. Now, this should make no difference either way. There is no death penalty for stealing a box of cigars, even if you are black. Johnson was not alleged to have stolen anything, and the police did not press charges against him. Nonetheless, Fox News specifically cited the robbery to discredit his testimony. This demonization did not go unchallenged, and pressure has even forced some backtracking. The New York Times was forced to apologize for the use of the phrase "no angel" about Michael Brown. The other group to be demonized in the media coverage was, of course, the Ferguson protesters, who were routinely accused of violence. There has been much less outrage over the murder of DeAndre Joshua, a friend of Dorian Johnson and a witness in the grand jury trial, who was shot, doused in gasoline, and set on fire. In fact, in some of the reporting in Fox and the Daily Mail, the death was blamed on the protesters and cited as the first casualty of the riots. Even the burning down of a church attended by Michael Brown Sr. was blamed on protesters in some reports, even though it is 3 miles away from where the protest took place, and the church pastor believes it was a white supremacist revenge attack. Demonization in the liberal media tended to follow different patterns, reinforcing Obama's centrist platitudes about peace and calm. Of course, Fox characteristically denounced the protesters as outside agitators and took a strongly pro-cop line. But the New York Times featured an op-ed pointing out that riots are a predictable response to injustice. Time magazine published a piece in defense of rioting. Meanwhile, both the New York Times and the Washington Post report considerable unease, even among some Republicans, over the scale of the militarized response to protesters in Ferguson. Because riots are not always the language of the unheard. What happens when the police riot? This, as The Nation magazine reported, is surely what has happened in Ferguson. Heavily armed SWAT teams deployed against legally assembled protesters, firing tear gas and attacking people who have broken no law. Again, while they have shied away from terms like police riot, there is evidence of some of the media being shocked by the extent of suppression. CNN's Jake Tapper reported directly from the police riot, showing their use of tear gas and other weapons against unsuspecting, peaceful protesters. Next day it was back to normal, with Don Lemon embedded among the police and reporting from their perspective. Part of the reason for the criticisms of Ferguson police is that quite a lot of force was used against journalists who were fired on and arrested. Another reason is the fact that in the age of live streaming, with a subject that everyone is following intently, it is impossible to suppress the truth entirely. Perhaps no issue more exposes media bias, however, than the extraordinary prosecution of Darren Wilson at the grand jury. It has fallen to some liberal websites like Daily Kos and Vox, and social media users like trial lawyer Lisa Bloom, as well as a small number of voices in the mainstream media, such as CNN's Lawrence MacDonald, to point out just how supine the prosecution actually was. The New York Times was typical in its post-verdict reporting in that it did allow some weak criticism of the prosecution, noting that while some witnesses backed up the police version of events, some did not, and that the prosecution was more vigorous in questioning those accounts which did not. What it did not report was that the great majority of witnesses, 16 in total, disagreed with the police line, particularly the claim that Michael Brown did not have his hands up when shot and was in fact charging at Officer Wilson. And it fell to a small website, the Daily Banter, to point out that in the grand jury evidence, Wilson had told his own sergeant that Brown had his hands up. But it goes deeper than that. Wilson claimed that Michael Brown attacked him. He had to, because of the Supreme Court's 1985 ruling that an officer can only kill a suspect if he poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury. So Wilson said Brown punched him, including once on the right side of his face with a right hand through the driver's side window. The prosecution did not ask, how could Brown, who was facing the left side of Wilson, punch him on the right cheek with his right hand? And if he punched you so hard that you feared for your life and had to shoot, where were the injuries commensurate with that? Why was there no bleeding, no laceration, and no bruising, according to the medical report? Why did the hospital report say you seemed to be in no apparent distress? And why did you tell police that he struck you 10 times in the face and now say he only struck you twice? Wilson also claimed that after the first shot, Brown ran away, then turned around and charged back toward Wilson in a threatening manner. And he claimed that even several further shots didn't stop Brown from rushing towards him. The prosecution didn't ask, if that is true, why do the great majority of witnesses, 16 in total, say that they saw Brown with his hands in the air, not running towards you? Most of the media did not ask, why didn't the prosecutor ask for charges to be filed? Why did the prosecutor present all the defense evidence? One person who did ask those questions was Lisa Bloom via her Twitter account, and it went viral. So while the New York Times warned readers against the notoriously inaccurate social media site, users were getting far more from it than from the Times pages. Only one mainstream media spokesperson, Lawrence O'Donnell of CNN, mentioned the fact that the prosecution had misled the jury about the law on police shootings citing an old and unconstitutional Missouri statute, so that they heard most of the testimony under the misapprehension that what Darren Wilson had done had been legal. Once the verdict was in, few questions were raised, and the right-wing media were exultant. Fox News laughed at the Brown family attorney. National Review commended the grand jury decision. Wilson was given a kid gloves interview on ABC. The American novelist Harper Lee once wrote, "In our courts, when it's a white man's word against a black man's, the white man always wins. Those are the facts of life." And unfortunately, those are also the facts of the media.